Everyone, and welcome to this town hall meeting that Speaker Saiki and I are sponsoring, but really this is a city show. We really appreciate the Mayor Blangiardi and his team joining us today. We have been doing these town hall meetings, and today we're going to focus on Kaka'ako and Sheridan, Kalimo-Ili areas. But what we see are the problems that have been surfacing are the same across our whole state, and especially in our areas. So we have invited the city and Mayor and his team because all of them are city problems. And we really appreciate his joining us tonight. We are going for an hour from 5:30 to 6:30. So if you have any burning questions, put them in the chat box and we will have these questions answered as best we can. So I'm going to turn it over to Speaker Saiki if he has a few words to say, but thank you all for joining us.
Thanks. I'll just be really brief. I want to thank all of the residents who have joined us tonight and who have submitted questions. We'll try our hardest to answer your questions. I also want to thank the mayor and his team for making the time to be here tonight. He's brought a lot of people with him, and I think we'll have a really good town hall tonight. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Hello. So we'll turn it over to Mayor Rick Blangiardi and his team.
Thank you, Senator Moriwaki and Speaker Saiki. Let me just say up front, we really appreciate and value this opportunity. And I mean that very sincerely, because every time we get a chance to speak as a team and hear from different members of our team, it buoys my confidence, because one of the things that I'm most proud of is all of us have come in during an extremely challenging time, having been sworn in 15 months ago in the middle of a pandemic, to a set of circumstances, irrespective of what went on before us, were completely unprecedented. And we then chose amongst ourselves in our own discussions that whether it was by necessity or design, we were going to take all the hard stuff on and try to make a real difference at this point in time from a leadership standpoint. So we have an opportunity like this, and you can hear from some of them. I'm so proud of them all that I welcome that opportunity. And of course, I know you're only kidding when you say it's all our problem, Senator, because you've been a big problem solver for a long time yourself. And same with you, Speaker Saiki. So let me just introduce our team. First of all, to my right, I guess, on the screen, to my left, Mike Formby, Managing Director. Extremely proud of Michael. Our newest member of our team, Scott Humber, our Director of Communications, who's in his second week. I've asked Scott to kind of sit in here. He's getting orientation here, but who knows, we might throw a couple of questions at him as well, because Scott comes to the job as having been the former news director for Hawaii News Now for a decade or more, and is very aware of the issues facing our city, and brings really interesting breadth and depth of experience to the job. And then in the room over here, starting, I guess, Roger Morton, our Director of Transportation Services. I always tell him not to embarrass him, best transportation guy in the state. His deputy, John Nauchi. I guess that makes John second best transportation guy in the state. But honestly, these guys know everything there is to know about it. Ian Sante is in here. He's going to represent, I guess, Jim Ireland, who's recovering from some surgery, but also Ian with EMS and in our core program and all of our initiatives that we're trying to get done with homelessness and everything else is really very articulate. And right behind him, I believe, is Trish LaChica, who's also fairly brand new to us. Trish has been with us for a few months. She's our Executive Director of Housing and Homelessness. We choose to put that in there because we're all looking at homelessness as something that we all have to deal with. And then behind them is Krishna Jairam, who's the Deputy Managing Director to Mike Formby. So you have all of us tonight. Like I said, I'm always willing to pass off, but we're ready to take on any questions, and we want to make this hour as meaningful as we can possibly be for all of those from our community that have turned in to participate.
I can't see one person, but there's somebody in the back of Trish.
Mayor, Don just entered the room too.
Don Sevchik.
Oh, Don Sevchik. Wow. Don
Sevchik. Hi, everyone.
Don Sevchik. I'm so proud of Don Sevchik. You want to talk about throwing somebody in deep end of the pool. Dawn took over facilities and maintenance. She's our director. She came to us when she was working to be the deputy director with Dr. Roger Babcock, who's now moved over to take over ENV. and Don's just doing a great job. Don, thank you for being here tonight. I didn't see you get on the screen. And the reason why I'm sitting in my office is exactly because what we see on the screen. You all look kind of miniaturized here. So,
And Mayor, I also have Tyler Sugihara online. He's our chief of the department or division of road maintenance. So big player here. So have Tyler online. So.
I saw Tyler's name on the screen, but I wasn't, looks familiar to me, but honestly, I wasn't sure who he might be. And look at this. All I know is I have 3 pictures. One, the real live speaker, Saiki, and then 2 other pictures of speaking. I'm going to on the screen. I mean, wow.
So Mayor, do you want to start off with giving us the overview of the transportation? We have Roger and John and Hart. What you're doing with Hart? I think there's a lot of interest in that.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that, and I think we can all participate in the real discussion. But let me just tell you from a priority standpoint, really, nothing much has changed from what we talked about during the campaign. And after we got elected, we were determined not to let COVID get in the way. But these are all big issues, and I think our top 3 deal with our homeless situation. Clearly, the rail project, because it is just what it is. It's one of a kind and unique to our times and our history as a state. And also the building of affordable housing, which we all know is more than just a mandate. And along with that also is, the fixing of the Department of Planning and Permitting, which is no small task after decades of neglect and other issues there. But so those are big priorities for us. And then we get into the issues of safety, public safety. We're going through a lot right now with a shortage of police officers, and we're hoping to do something about that, and all of our first responders for that matter. And then, our infrastructure issues. We have Dawn on the phone today. We don't have it from EAV, but she's involved with some of that. But, there is so much to do. I could embellish it. I would tell you even elder care, but these are all big topics involving lots of people, not only from the city and county end of it in trying to address those problems, but the way that they touch the lives of everybody who lives here. And the one thing I've gotten in touch with over our first 15 months in office is not only this incredible, for me, unprecedented sense of responsibility, but you realize, and to go back kind of, Senator, what you were saying, the city touches everybody's lives multiple times a day. And the departments that we work in, the things that we do really impact the lives of people, the quality of lives of people. So therefore, the mandate, if you will, to make those services which we provide and working for the public as good as we possibly can is not lost on any of us. It's extremely important. So, I would tell you first and foremost, we're doing some really progressive things with homelessness. And just today, we're at the River of Life, and after 35 mission on Hawaii Street, after 35 years of distributing free food, which was a very noble service in their ministry, but nonetheless, unintended consequence was the aggregation of homeless people, not just homeless people down on their luck in need of a meal, but mentally ill, substance abuse, drew in a lot of criminal activity, et cetera, for them to stop after 35 years and shift their ministry and their purpose and moving out of Chinatown and share a vision for us, not just in what we want to do in Chinatown, but what we want to do with respect to the homeless problem, the chronic problem, is our core program. Our core program is a very different program than anything that's been done before. I want to really kind of turn over to Ian and talk about that in a second, but we're taking a different strategy. It's taken us the better part of a year to set up. We've had to rely on some federal monies as well, but we now have personnel. We now have a strategy. We have vehicles. We have an ability to implement. We've now taken over some headquarters, and we think the road ahead is going to be very effective and very successful. And we're really determined to take a big bite out of homelessness. And that brings me, I'm going to let Roger talk about the rail, but I'm really proud of, in our State of the City 2 weeks ago, we talked about what we wanted to do. And as I said, in very simple terms, after meeting weekly, 90 minutes a week, all these many months with all of us, just not only Roger and John, but Mike Formby, myself, ever since she got elected chair of the board, Colleen Hanabusa, Tommy Waters, head of city council, and we've even brought in, I'm drawing a blank right now at the table, but we've collaborated, we've worked on it, and just as a matter of principle, when we came into office, They announced that they pulled out the P3. They fired the former CEO, Andy Robbins. They announced a time delay to 2033 to completion at Ala Moana, if then. And then on top of that, we soon learned that we had a budget deficit of some $3.67 billion. And this was right in the middle of the pandemic. We worked really long and hard, understanding that we're in breach of contract with the FTA, to make some sense of it to the FTA, who was bewildered, but also to the people of our island, who were more than bewildered. They were angry, they were frustrated. This was a promise that was made that was not only unfulfilled, it was a promise that was broken repeatedly over the course of time, to the point where it was really difficult to get any kind of support on this project. And we were asked to make some sense of it. We'll talk about that. We think we have. We're in the midst now of final stages. We're finishing our recovery plan that we plan on submitting on or before June 30th. Right now, this very week, the feds are in town. They're going through it. We've already passed muster on a number of checkpoints, if you will. We feel pretty confident. We have to finalize that plan. But if that happens, then we get them to approve an amended full funding grant agreement with no financial penalty. We'll change the terminus to Civic Center, which brings us 1.25 miles short of Ala Moana. Doesn't mean we give up on Ala Moana. Doesn't mean that there's even a bigger future beyond that. But in these kind of projects, these mega projects, this is a nearly $10 billion project. They come in phases in order to finance them properly and construct them properly. And what we decided to do in the scheme of things, instead of deal with all of this uncertainty and everything else, was to bring clarity. So as a matter of practicality, we said to ourselves, how much money do we have and what can we build with that? And that's what we've come up with. So at the end of the day, we know from 4 different funding sources, we have $9.8 billion. 9.1 of that's going to go to construction. The balance is in financing costs. We have an opportunity to drive down the financing costs if the FTA steps in again as a construction partner and starts to release those monies. I'm very excited about what we're going to do with the rail. The guideway is now 75% complete. 9 of our stations are complete, and the other 4 more than 60% complete as we start to head in, coming around Middle Street down the Dillingham corridor. So we're excited about that. And then the other thing I'll tell you, I'm going to let Mike to talk about affordable housing, because he's really taken this on along with Christian, who's on the call as well. But affordable housing has been talked about forever. And one of the things that I learned very quickly coming into here is there were a lot of things in the city that got in the way of us really being, quite honestly, a good partner. Beyond the troubles of DPP and what the developers had, we had a lot of other systemic issues to deal with. From the standpoint of ordinances, the cost of construction, the lack of incentives, the lack of strategy, know-how, et cetera. And we've looked at all of that and what we can possibly do to run this on 2 tracks. One, what government can do, and the other, what we can do as a private sector, or work with the private sector in a public-private partnership to incent our developers so that they will build, against a 30% AMI, because there's really never any money in that, all the way up to 60 and other things. But, at the end of the day, it takes a while to get that going. It's not an excuse. All of us have an incredible sense of urgency. We're 15 months into it. But if I just took those top 3, homelessness, the rail, and affordable housing, I will tell you, we have broken away from past practices. We have an entirely different focus on what we're doing and how we're going to do it. I have every confidence we will get it done, and we're going to get it done in an unprecedented way. So with that, let me just, let's kick it off with homelessness. Ian, let's go to you. How's that? Is that okay? Is that enough of an overview? Because I could talk for an hour. If I talk for an hour, all these people are going to say, why am I on this call? You talk the whole time. So with that said, Ian, let's go.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Again, Ian Santi, Deputy Director, Honolulu Emergency Services Department. We work with the EMS, our ocean safety, our health services, and now our newly birthed program, the CORE program, Crisis Outreach, Response, and Engagement. Credit goes to the program under Director Anton Krucky, who is currently the Director of the Community Services Department, with collaboration with Trista Chica, the Executive Director for Housing and Homelessness, and my Director, Dr. James Ireland. The CORE program on a soft launch began back in October with just an ambulance, a repurposed ambulance to address the homeless needs in the Chinatown community area. As it grew, as we were able to get funding, we officially launched with our community health workers in December. Since December, we now currently have 25 staff on board. We have 768-CORE number. So if you find somebody that is in need of our services that is not an acute emergency or an acute pending, we ask people to call that number and we will get out to you within the next 24 to 48 hours to help address the houseless person or the people in that area that need our assistance. We've received over 315 calls island-wide. We have already 101 clients on board our services that we are helping to facilitate in various levels. We specifically have 38 clients that we are actually offering case management to or working with working with them to get some type of shelter. And we've actually housed or participated in at least 12 people have gotten some type of housing at this point, transitional or even actually permanent housing. Our program is unique and different because it focuses directly on the medical mental health area and the frequency of somebody going to the emergency room. And we're trying to address we're trying to address their needs directly. Our staff goes to the individuals that they see on the street. We encourage them to go to the Punawai rest stop to get a shower, wash their clothes, and some hygiene measures. We try to see these individuals on a daily basis or at least twice a week to at least get them to some type of service. And as everybody knows, dealing with the houseless person is very challenging. There are people that do need housing, and there are people that don't want to actually get housing. So we work with all the different variety of backgrounds, and we're trying to expand as we go. You may have seen that we went to the Kailua one day last week as a offshoot for a core saturation, we called it, to just go into the community and look around and see how we can help. We've actually expanded into the downtown area, and we've gone as far as Mo'ili'ili at this point. So we did go out to the old stadium park and do a assessment there, and we were able to actually meet up with some of the clients and actually get them some services also. I'll turn it over.
Back to the mayor.
I'll get back to you, Mayor. If there's anything, I guess.
Let's go to Tricia. Tricia, what do you want to add to that? Good.
Yes. Aloha, everyone. Tricia Chica, Mayor's Office of Housing and Homelessness. You know, as Mayor mentioned and Deputy Director Santi mentioned, you know, the city taking on this function of directly addressing homelessness hasn't been done it's only been done in recent years, and this type of program is the first of its kind for the city, and we're quite proud of what it has been able to accomplish. Right now we're focused in Chinatown and Mo'ili'ili and Waikiki, but the goal is to be able to expand to the entire island, and we're doing it, you know, district by district in a meaningful way. The function of homeless outreach has always been with the state. And so we're really here to expand and add to capacity, but also reduce the burden that our law enforcement has been experiencing and our, you know, hospitals and emergency rooms. And as Mayor said, you know, as his priority is for homelessness, you know, the street is not a home. And it is the administration's priority to be able to house everybody and be able to address, you know, their needs. If you look at being able to approach somebody on the street and offer them housing, the decision to accept treatment, housing, or shelter lies with that individual alone. I mean, just as context anecdotally for CORE, they were one of the individuals they had worked with in Chinatown. They had to work with her every day for a month until she accepted treatment. And so it does take, you know, that level of trust to be developed, but also in order for us to really be successful in housing somebody off the street, we need housing and we need open spaces. And every day the daily reports of shelter isn't there. We do know that there is a severe need and lack. And we do have, you know, through the managing director, deputy managing director, are actively every day working with our affordable housing working group, constantly looking at different ways we can either acquire, find property, or even work with different partners who can help us in this effort and add to the city's inventory of affordable housing. And so it takes a whole community approach. And as Mayor said, these are the top priorities of the administration, and we're very committed to driving this and seeing transformational change. So I'll pass it back to you, Mayor.
Let me just add one other footnote so we can move on and maybe talk about rail.
Before moving on, because this is kind of a major problem in our district, if everybody's complaining, where do I call? So do they call CORE or Tricia, your housing and homeless office, or what are some numbers where people can call? Because there's a lot of concern about homeless in their neighborhoods.
So right now we are the number to call is 768 CORE. If they are able to send our community health workers on the street to make that kind of triage, that level of coordination and assess what that person needs. Of course, our office is through, reaching out and contacting the mayor's office. We do respond to the requests. We do contact the service providers in each of the different regions on the island, as well as the Honolulu Police Department, to determine what, how familiar they are with the different issues and what plan is in place for each of the different areas. We also work with Department of Facilities and Maintenance on different areas where there is stored property and how that is also being enforced.
So the best number to call is the 768 CORE, and they can get routed to the right places.
Right. And they can email us, Office of Housing at honolulu.gov. We can put that in the chat too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Mayor.
All I was going to say to it is we all know that homelessness is a very complicated problem. And as Ian mentioned, requirements of people that are on the streets, we're dealing with either mental health issues or substance abuse problems, and for the most part. And so, CORE is not the only function, and we have a whole new project which has proven this year to be really good at helping temporarily shelter people, really direct them to places. And the other thing that we are really working well with respect to our offices is we had the Oahu Housing Now project, which this year, in 1 year, we took care of 300 families, with vouchers, took 787 people off the streets. It was a big goal to reach. And this 60% of the people were from Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities that were impacted by COVID. So it's a multi-pronged approach. But just to reiterate one more thing, we are looking, and maybe Mike will talk about it, on building of affordable housing and what we're doing and constructing and adaptive reuses. All of that is one phase, but we also need places to put these people. Right now, we're in discussions, and actually, in one case, have a letter of interest that's been signed by both parties. They're looking to acquire facilities that will allow us to take these people and put them places where they'll have ongoing treatments, not be stuck in a shelter that they don't like, they can't deal with. We're talking about places where they go and they're really taken care of. And that's our end game here. So we're pretty excited about that. So anyway, we're committed to that. There's no simple answer. It's taken decades to get the way it is. It's going to take a while for us to really have it be noticeable. But I can tell you, in certain areas, and I was in Chinatown today for the River of Life press conference, and everybody there was commenting on how many people are off the streets now that only yesterday was seemingly there. So we're making some inroads. We have a long, long way to go. So let's kick it off with rail. And I see in here about, look, let me be really clear to everybody on this call, okay? We understand the benefit of Ala Moana. I want to say it again. We don't have enough money to get to Ala Moana at this point in time with the funding sources available to us. Therefore, rather than talk about something that we cannot deliver on, even with the FTA, which really is a very important, because they're our construction partner, to the tune of an additional $744 million they're hoping they'll bring in, we will figure out the ongoing phases. But it's important for us to put this phase one into perspective for them, to bring them back in, so we can get them to participate financially, come to an agreement, eliminate us being in breach of contract, and then figure out where we go from there. Because not only if it were up to me, we'll see how long this takes. We have, we've got some time now. I mean, we would think about not only going to Ala Moana, but probably even on the back end, taking it and building it from the middle of nowhere in Kapolei into Kamakana-Ali'i. So nobody's going to give up on the ultimate end goal. We get it. We just don't have enough money to get there. And that has been the burden of this project, is not understanding the numbers, the finances of it. And that's what we brought into focus. So good, Mike.
Because I think it's a point that's missed quite often. And that is the really important thing right now is to secure release of $744 million in federal funds. And when you submit your recovery plan to the FTA, you have to demonstrate financial capacity. So if we can't demonstrate financial capacity to get to Ala Moana Center, they're not going to release the $744 million. So what's been discussed about between Hart, Mayor, and the City Council was going into the FTA and saying what we can do, which is we can demonstrate financial capacity to Civic Center. So we'll get up Dillingham Corridor, we'll get through all the major employment centers, we'll get to Civic Center. And if we can convince them that by demonstrating financial capacity to Civic Center, they'll release the full $744 million outstanding, then we'll work on phase 2 to get to Ala Moana Center and beyond. So it's not that we've given up anything. It's that we want to get their money in our hands so that we can get as far as we can to make this a functional project. What we don't want to do is stop at Middle Street. If we can't get that $744 million, we're not getting to downtown. So we've got to get the money first. And that's what the mayor went to DC, made a commitment to Nuria Fernandez, the FTA administrator. And when we submit the recovery plan, that's the goal, get the full federal funding.
Thank you, Mike.
Mayor, shall I jump in?
Well, one last thing on that money. The FDA has not given us any money since 2017. And so we've had to borrow, which was not part of the plan, a lot of money for construction, which has been very costly, not the least of which has been the financing cost. This is a big financial project. This is almost a $10 billion project where all gets said and done between construction and finance. And you've got to be able to manage that, understand the flow of money and how to make that work. If we can get them to release that $744 million in the next 36 months, it'll save us $100 million in financing costs alone. That is substantive. That is really substantive, not to mention what else we might do in the way of value engineering and everything else now as we continue to build this out. So I want to be really clear. Nobody's giving up on anything. We're just trying to put to the test a level of proving out both our financial and our technical capacity to deliver this in a timely way. So I just hopefully everybody can embrace that. It's a transformative project. When it was designed and announced, it was going to be a 100-year project. This is going to change life on this island considerably on so many levels that are so positive. But we've got to be able to do it right. And up till now, it's a source of frustration for a lot of people. Roger, return to you.
All right. So my name is Roger Morton. I'm the Director of Transportation Services. My background really has been in transportation in the state for about 40 years. I spent my last 15 years before the mayor appointed me to this position as the CEO of the bus company. I have a pretty good grasp on transit. Here, we've always had a strong transit ridership, always. We've been the 5th highest per capita in the country. When I tell people that we carry 68 million, or pre-COVID, we carried 68 million passengers per year, a lot of people just don't understand the magnitude of the transit here. As the mayor said, I haven't heard any discussion at all about stopping at Civic Center, except in terms of a phasing of it, so that we may stop in a phase. When I look at systems on the mainland, they started oftentimes as 10-mile systems that are now 100-mile systems, but that takes 60, 70 years sometimes to get to that level of extension. We've talked a little bit about rail in the long term, getting to Civic Center, downtown Civic Center, and onto Ala Moana. But I'm also very excited that we are going to be operating rail before the end of this calendar year ends. Probably we're looking at the October, sometime in the fall timeframe to start operating. And that's when we really need to put our best foot forward. My staff and myself have been looking, and we've been devising how we can expand our bus system plan for Ala Moana. We're stretching it back a little bit to Civic Center, but we're planning on providing excellent service to Ala Moana, to UH, and to Waikiki from wherever we stop. In terms of rail itself, yes, it's been a tremendous expensive proposition, more than I ever thought it would be. My experience with rail goes back to the first Frank Fosse rail plan. Rail here really goes back to 1967, when the Hawaii transportation, the Honolulu transportation plan planned for a rail system along the major corridor in Honolulu. Of course, we had a mid-'80s, mid-'70s, mid-'80s attempt to do that. That was 80% funded by the feds. Then we had a 92 effort that was 50% funded by the feds. And now we are at we have the same money, but the percentage is much, much less. In terms of how much is our O&M going to cost, that's always been an issue for a lot of people. Our O&M for rail for our first year, for a full year, will be about $96 million. And while that's a huge amount, that's I need to put it in comparison to our bus, which is $220 million, our handy van, which is $65 million, and our rail, which will be about $96 million. And you can determine, those are areas where the city is going to step up to provide that level of service. So we're going to do our best in making this not only an excellent system, not only a national showcase, but we'll be the first driverless automated system in the country. We want to make this really a system that's on par with any other system around the world. Well, that's our commitment at the Department of Transportation Services, is to operate a fully functional system that will have great connections for people. And for the period that we are at Civic Center, we're going to provide a great service from that point. I do agree with Edwin's comments that we would love to get to Ala Moana. Let's speak a little bit about that. He said that we should maybe consider eliminating some stations. Well, we're pretty far along on planning those stations, but we did look, Hart did look at doing, eliminating some of the stations. There's not that many to eliminate, though. We're committed to Middle Street. Those stations are already under construction. So what do we have left? We have Kalihi, we have Kapalama, we have Ivalei, we have Chinatown, we have downtown. Those are all the stations we have. And many of our most transit-dependent populations live in those areas, and that's who our bulk of our ridership comes from on our buses, from our close-in people in Kalihi, and in the Kapalama area, and in Salt Lake, and that whole corridor. So they're just, at the end of the day, we considered moving our downtown station a little bit westward and eliminating our Chinatown station. It just didn't. It doesn't provide enough money to do what Edwin wants to do, and it disenfranchises a lot of people who are going to be our core users, our transit dependent, our people that are really dependent upon transit every day. So those are the issues we looked at. But believe me, we did long hours of looking at what can we do to save costs? Can we eliminate stations? Can we eliminate other things? Of course, we did there's one of the parking garages, which is controversial, but that was a $300 million parking garage that, as our model showed, didn't add that much ridership to our system. So, at the end of the day, the mayor, Hart, myself, everybody has to make decisions on what can we do that's the best with the money that we have. And that's where we've landed right now, is at Civic Center.
Roger, can you just expound on the connections, because people want to be able to go from one place to another, whether it's by rail or by bus or by other kinds of modes of public transportation, and especially in the downtown area where we live. And have you a plan on how, I guess the rail was the spine, and you've got these connectors so that people can still get around with public transportation easily?
Senator, I'd like to defer to my deputy, who's really my expert on bus route planning and integration. So John?
Aloha, John Nauchi, Deputy Director of DTS. Yes, Senator, to address your question, we have been working very extensively to make sure that, yes, you actually characterized it just right. The rail is the heavy duty spine. We can carry thousands and thousands of people on this spine, but that in isolation is not enough. We know that almost half the people that are going to connect to this rail system are going to reach it by bus. And so we are in the process of replanning and reorienting our bus network in many places to actually feed the rail. I call it feeding the beast. Because, you know, the buses can only hold so many people, but the rail is like a big pipe and the buses are a bunch of, you know, little smaller pipes feeding the big pipe. So on the downtown area, what we have planned right now from the Civic Center station is we have a bunch of connecting routes that actually operate between downtown and Civic Center and branch out to actually fulfill rail's destiny to UH Manoa and Waikiki and, you know, everywhere in between. So to that, we think we're building strong connections. When we open rail, hopefully later this year, we will have a rapid bus that connects people directly from the Aloha Stadium station and delivers them via freeway to downtown and Ala Moana and UH Manoa. And on the other side in Kapolei, we're not neglecting that connection that Mayor actually spoke hopefully of, that we're running something very frequently from downtown Kapolei through the villages of Kapolei and to the first and second rail stations.
You're on mute, Senator.
Senator, you're on mute.
I don't see any other real questions, but going back to Trish, I think Mayor, dealing with homelessness, that I think, Trish, you had mentioned that the individual refusing help or services, what kind of strategy do you have to still get them off the streets? And maybe it's Ian. Homeless people, and they're with smartphones and they have all kinds of, it seems, ways in which they can service themselves, but how do we get them to the right places?
Yeah, well, I'll add something. I want to hear from what they said too, because I mean, part of that also might be an implication that part of the homeless population is a criminal element as well. And that's one of the things we've been working closely with. And quite honestly, we've made a number of arrests, especially in the Chinatown district, 150. And one of the things we've worked out with Steve Arm as our prosecutor is to make sure that we can enforce these things after they're arrested, to support our police in doing that. We've taken a big bite out of that kind of element, if you will. Now, I'm not suggesting somebody who's just down, who could be mental, they could have self-harm syndrome. Just so you know, one of the things we were dealing with was a criminal element in our initial approach, especially in the downtown corridor, and a lot of heavy drug dealing. And those were some of those guys. And those are some of the people who are absolutely going to refuse services too. This is not an easy thing to deal with. And so, we know that, and we're just going to keep hammering away at that. Part of that strategy is to be ruthlessly consistent in reaching out to, as you identify with the homeless people that whom you know in these districts, in these areas, there's enough people that we could know who they are and what their stories are, and just keep working away at that. Some of this is just that. It's just going to take ruthless consistency to gain their trust. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ian.
Yeah, Mayor is right. You know, the program that prosecuting attorney Steve Alm has really spearheaded when he was the U.S. attorney in the late 90s was called Weed and Seed, which was a federal program. And we restarted that again last year with the administration and focusing on Chinatown, again, with the goal that we are able to expand to other communities on Oahu. And it does create an increased level of enforcement. And so it's a strong partnership with Honolulu Police Department. But the seed part of it, and I'm working closely with their office, is a partnership with the State Adult Mental Health Division, where as a condition of, after being charged and as a condition of release, is they have to get treatment and assessment for rehabilitation and be able to get the medical and mental health, behavioral health treatment that they need prior to release and getting reintegrated into the community. We want to end the revolving door of homelessness. The other, strategy is, what we are seeing when we look at the data from what Chinatown, at least what was experiencing in terms of crime, is we're nowhere near that level. And so we know that a lot of, the very chronic homelessness cases that we're experiencing are due to mental health and medical issues, ongoing issues. And so, with there is a Hawaii Care crisis line for mental health, because that is still a state function. And I can put the phone number in the chat, because they do have their own mental health crisis teams that go out. But with us, we know in the city that, we want to be able to address that, that segment of the population too. And so we are going to hire a psychiatrist as well as nurse practitioners to be able to assist the core program. The question in the chat about anyone who is refusing services, as I mentioned earlier, we don't stop at that, when with case management, doesn't stop at that, 1 encounter, 2 encounters. Core goes out every single day until that person is ready and able to do that. There are interventions, but that requires the intervention of the court in order for them to get the treatment that they need. On the smartphones, these are the free phones are being provided by some of the, nonprofit organizations that service the homeless, as well as health centers. Because they are mobile, they move from place to place. It's very difficult to locate them or get them to meet their appointments or meet with their case managers, make their appointments for receiving housing services. And so the phones that they're getting, they're not smartphones. They're really enables them to text and call, and they have limited, value in them. And they do get lost and stolen at times, but it is a free federal program. And that helps to really continue that. There's no disruption in the service for homeless folks. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Ian.
You're good.
Thank you. Mayor, back to you, Senator.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I think we have about 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that the people on the Zoom have an opportunity. I don't see anybody chatting.
Sharon,
but,
Sharon, there are several residents who submitted questions beforehand about
Okay.
homeless in certain areas. So I think they should probably, we can provide that to Trish, but they could also residents can also call that 768 core number to report these homeless populations.
And Speaker Saiki, we're expanding. You heard Ian say we're out now up to 26 people. We expect, you just heard Tricia say we're going to hire a psychiatrist and a nurse practitioner. But these healthcare workers we're hiring are all professionally trained people, and we expect to expand to 50 by the end of the year in the next 6 to 7 months, actually. And so, with those numbers, it's going to allow us to be able to reach into more neighborhoods. And one thing about homelessness now, we know how pervasive it is, and we know it's in a lot of neighborhoods, in a lot of places. In some cases, we would least likely want to see it. That takes manpower. So, we're not necessarily predefining. If we started out anywhere, we started in Chinatown because we have a greater picture in Chinatown about the revitalization of Chinatown. But we also know, as Tricia just alluded to, we knew that that's where the preponderance of criminal activity was taking place. And we also wanted to take that head on as well, because that's what was creating a real danger for a lot of people who live there, work there, people want to visit. It was killing the restaurant business, so that was our approach in that. But as we expand and we're mobile, we have 4 ambulances now, 3 SUVs. How many more ambulances will we be adding to our fleet by the end of the year? At least 2 more, right? Ian.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't making sure if it was on mute or not. Yeah, we're trying to get up. We want to try and have actively at least 4 ambulances on a daily basis, and we're hoping to get more ambulances as we do it. And then the primary purpose of those ambulances are, one, to take an individual not to the usual location of the emergency room. It's to help defer them to a clinic or get them to the Punawai rest stop or someplace to get the services that they need. So it's a different approach in our 911 system. So again, as Mayor pointed out, speakers, again, it's 768 CORE. We'll work with the community and we'll work with our health workers.
Well, yeah, and the only reason why I bring up the vehicles is this is mobile. I mean, as we have more manpower, more vehicles, we expect to go places and, to be as far reaching as we possibly can, just for perspective.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
Speaker, you see any other questions? I think also the interest in your affordable housing, you can elaborate on that. What's your time frame, numbers for building more housing?
I know Mike just walked out of the room, but I have Krishna next to me. I'll tell you before he says a word, it's been hard to show how much we've done so far, but in the behind the scenes things and what it takes to set up, I'm very pleased and very proud of our initiatives and how much activity we have going. So
Sure.
I'll turn it over to Krishna.
Senator, we're currently working with the Affordable Housing Working Group that Trish mentioned earlier. It's actually it seems like a relatively simple measure, but it's startlingly effective. And we have key departments that are involved in the housing issue, all gathering routinely to talk through our strategy, to talk through what we're doing. So we have the Department of Planning and Permitting, which obviously is critical in terms of getting developments out there. We have the Department of Land Management that's involved in acquiring properties. We have Trish with housing. And then, and what's interesting here is we not only have those guys, but we have all the other departments that might even touch on the housing issue. So we have Department of Transportation Services, we have Roger, we have Parks, we have everybody involved. So we meet every other week on this. And what we're currently doing right now is we're meeting with stakeholder groups. So we're meeting with developers, we're meeting with housing advocates, we're meeting with young people who are interested in the housing issue. We're meeting with Habitat. So right now we're in this phase where under Trish's leadership, we're learning, we're looking, and we're trying to understand what the issue is, because we really believe we need to have a solid understanding of the issue before we come up with a strategy. So that's in progress, but at the same time we're executing. So I don't know if everyone knows this, but Department of Community Services launched a $30 million RFP for housing projects. As the mayor mentioned, we currently have several big potential acquisitions in the pipeline that we're not quite ready to discuss yet, but that will contribute, I think, significantly to this effort. And on the regulatory side, for the first time in 30 years, the city is going to become a player in the private activity bond area, which is a financing mechanism. So in terms of,
It actually provides an incentive.
That's
I
right.
think it's really important, because we need to be building housing that people can afford, and yet there has to be a margin in there for the developers. And this is how you create that margin or that incentive for them to be able to build at those price points.
That's right. So not only the private activity bonds, but under Dean Uchida's leadership at DPP, we're looking at 201H and making sure that we're better aligned with the state on the 201H program. So on both in terms of being active, in terms of developing affordable housing, in terms of incentivizing affordable housing, we're taking a lot of steps at this point.
I just saw in the chat room, 50 professionals to handle how many mobile homeless individuals. I'll tell you right now, the point in time count historically for the last 10 years, which I've never believed, because I think it's a multiple in talking to homeless service providers, has been at about 5,600. Any of the people will tell you, the experts in this, it's a multiple of that. So I think we've got at least 10,000 homeless people. We mitigated a lot of homelessness through our rent utility relief program, which we did a stellar job in over these months of COVID. But that's what we've got 50 people for. It's up against about 10,000. At the very least, it's up against 5,000. But I don't believe it's a 5,000 number. And nobody in the homeless service business thinks it's that number either.
Senator, you're on mute.
So
Feedback.
Yeah. This is
Okay,
so
so-
coming up in the chat. I want to be sure we address it.
Yeah. So I think also we had questions about the fire safety code, having to a lot of condo dwellers in our district and older buildings. And I don't know whether you have a handle on the strategy to address that.
Do you know anything about
In terms of Senator, are you referring to the sprinkler bill?
Yeah, the sprinklers. Mm.
Right. I think, we fully recognize that it's a cost burden on the condo associations and on the people who live there. And that's something that we're keenly aware of. At the same time, given what happened at
Marco Polo.
At Marco Polo,
life is also priceless. So that's the balance that we're trying to tread, and that the city council is dealing with.
But we recognize older buildings, older people, fixed incomes, increased costs of what it takes to retro a building. You know, these are really complicated issues. I can tell you on a personal level, having been on the Red Cross board for a number of years, one of the projects we did, I did it a couple of different times, was go out and install smoke alarms into these older condominiums, especially a lot in the Waikiki area. And typically I met people my age or older, which means they were in their 70s or 80s, and who've been living there, who didn't know how to put in a smoke alarm, but really worry about the fear of fire. And so I know that that's really real when somebody lives in a high rise and they're older, and you know, we're just trying to take that on wherever we can. You don't want to make it cost prohibitive. We're already dealing with an excessive cost, but as Kristen just said, it's the price of life. This is one of those things we're working through. But in new construction, we're pretty strict about what gets done, and safety is really important. It's the retrofitting of the older buildings and what can we possibly do and what's the best solution. And honestly, I wish we had a better answer. We're just taking it step at a time and seeing what we can get done.
And Senator, if I might go back to the housing just for one moment, one other important initiative that DPP is spearheading is our short-term vacation rental bill. That is actually, it directly impacts the housing issue, because we believe we're going to be taking homes out of that financial model where you go out and run a mini hotel. And so those homes, we believe, will no longer be short-term vacation rentals. They'll be available for local homes. And then that means everywhere down the line in terms of the AMI, people will be able to afford more and more.
Let me give you a perspective, and for our audience, that's anywhere. We have all the mapping software. That's the thing that's really great about this new day and age we live in with the technology. It's on Oahu, somewhere between 10 to 14,000 homes that are illegal vacation rentals. We're expanding in the resort zones, and we're allowing for more usage there, people who bought condo hotels or whatever. But in our residential neighborhoods, that's how pervasive it is. So, you know, we're not telling people they can't rent out to make incremental money. The difference is whether or not they're going to rent out, you know, for the tourists, and whatever that nets them more at the end of the month versus something that's more long-term and sustainable, if you will, and puts people into housing. That's a lot of housing right now that people just took off the market that they could be renting. Half of that is owned by off-island people. Half of that. So they pretty much invested in their own slot machines here to the detriment of neighborhoods, which has driven up the cost of housing prices, which is also part of it, because they've been showing, you know, their revenue producers, if you will, based on that. The whole thing has been out of control. So this is unprecedented. We've now gone to what, 3 times through the council. We think we have the votes. We're going to put this into law, and we think it's going to be a tremendous contribution of the city helping manage tourism to help drive better visitors here to Hawaii, and especially to Oahu, less pressure on our INA and our other resources. And, you know, we think it's a win-win all the way around. It's an unprecedented. It hasn't been done before, and I can promise you it doesn't go down without a lot of pain. But we're going to do this, and we're going to make it happen. These are lessons not only learned from COVID, but it's also absolutely essential because it's a way of getting housing in a much more short term, already built with no infrastructure issues, back into the market, and also return some of these neighborhoods to being what they were designed to be.
Really appreciate your leadership on a large, on all kinds of fronts. And we go from the really that macro level to the real mundane, like back to Roger. And what are you going to do about more pedestrian crossings with flashing lights?
Well, you know, okay. My first comment too would be that, you know, we are committed to Vision Zero. That's a program to just, you know, to make our objective having no fatalities on our roadways, pedestrian or motorists or all of those. That's a long way off, but that's what we're planning and working for. For pedestrians on the road, I guess one of the things that I just need to reach out to all of our kapuna to say that, you know, don't expect that car to stop. You have to be aware of your own surroundings. You got to be, you know, watching the car. But we at the city are putting in more of those flashing beacons. We just put one in, a rectangular flashing one in Kailua yesterday, and we're committed to having our streets become complete streets where they are designed not just for cars, but also for other roadway users, for pedestrians, for bicycle riders, for delivery trucks, for all of the things that our streets need to be used for. And sometimes we have designed them to be too much of a speedway to get people from place to place, particularly our local streets. Our local streets need to be, brought to a human scale, and we need to make sure that our folks, both people on the street, pedestrians, and our motorists, our streets are designed as much. We just had a great example with Speaker's crosswalk in his district, where we've come up with a creative solution to put a crosswalk back there along with an island in the middle to provide a little bit of space. I know that we get criticized for taking out crosswalks sometimes, but the studies that we look at from the Federal Highways Administration show that on a 4-lane road without protection, that's where a lot of fatalities and a lot of accidents occur. And so that we are doing our best trying to find a balance between making the crosswalk safer with all of the features that we could put in, and just also asking our community to be mindful. Don't expect the car to stop. To make sure that we look always. I do see a lot of our folks are looking down. They're looking at their phones. They're distracted, and I don't want to put blame on anybody, but just all of us need to be sensitive to what's going on around us.
And Speaker, if I could add to that, I just wanted to let you know that the collaboration that was fostered when we worked with HCDA and with your generous appropriation for future a permanent solution for that Kaka'ako crossing, that collaboration has grown. We do have another meeting scheduled with Craig from HCDA. So we're actually going to be looking at all the other places that HCA has control over, so we can collaborate and coordinate with them and just do these best practices so they appear more island-wide.
And just bringing it to even a broader scale too. One of the mayor's objectives, and I think also the governor as well, has been to forge a better partnership between the city and the State Department of Transportation. And I know, Senator, you sit on that on UMPO board, so you can see the more cooperation that we do have, and that's been a great thing for us. Tomorrow we actually have a meeting scheduled with our state partners tomorrow to help us map out how we can deal with this new funding available to all of us from this new infrastructure bill that's come out of the Congress. Our funding levels will be going up about 30%. And we have the opportunity there to do more pedestrian safety, to do more complete streets, more bikeways, and other transportation enhancements that I really think will truly, make our streets and our communities better.
I want to thank you because your administration has been really collaborative, and we haven't seen that before. So it's been wonderful where you could do a lot more with the state.
Yeah, I was going to make that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to add, Mayor, that in my years that this is the best cooperation I've seen between the state and the city agencies, not just on the traffic and road issues, but also on the homelessness issues.
Thanks.
So I want to thank you, Mayor, you and your administration for working with the state.
It's a two-way street, Speaker. You've reached out to us too, and it's not been lost on us. You've been a great resource and a really good partner, and I appreciate. It all starts with us all having the right attitude, understanding our responsibility. So, it's what we expect from each other. It's really nice to see the reciprocity. I feel very badly that one of our real stars on our team, Dawn Subcheck, didn't get to speak tonight. Dawn, I'm sorry you sat in the room for the last hour. We could give her own hour. I would promise you it would be.
I'm good. Thank you. No, thanks, Mayor.
I'm good. I'm out of here. I'm going home to my kids. Yeah.
No, yeah. Just know that we do also get in contact with Ed Sniffen from HDOT a lot. We work in concert definitely with State Housing, Scott. So it's been great collaboration, great synergies between state and city. So very excited to see what we can get done.
I won't feel so guilty now, Dawn. I'm glad you got that in there.
I guess we could go on for another hour, but I'm sorry that we have to leave you. We'll have to do this again. So I'm send it to speaker to close and Mayor.
Thank you again for giving us this opportunity.
Thank
Thank you for thinking of us and appreciate the kind acknowledgement and the words. And I'm going to say it again in closing. I'm so proud of our team. We have great expectations of each other. And as a result, I think great things are yet to come. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker.
Thanks, Mayor and your team. Thank you. And thanks to the residents for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Aloha.